This is the Pumpkin Queen. Okay, so what's with this super cool orange pedal? This is ultra limited edition. I'm just going to run it for Halloween this year. I'm going to do pre-orders. We'll cut it off around 5th of November. I think let it a little bit of overrun because paydays and stuff. And apart from being awesome orange and apart from being covered in pumpkin artwork, which isn't on there yet, it's basically going to be the Grand Classic at heart, but with a massive twist. So one of the super cool things about vintage pedals, which wasn't super cool at the time, is that all the components you had inside them had a tolerance. And for capacitors, that was typically at least 20%. And what that meant is from batch to batch, those capacitors varied. So you might buy a 10 nanofarad capacitor and it was only 9. And in the next batch, it might be 11. And in the batch after that, it might be 8.3. And the impact that had on the tone was significant. If you put a single resistor and capacitor in a circuit, that is as a tone filter. It's the most common tone filter used throughout pedals, and it is proportional. If you change the capacitor by 10%, you change the EQ by 10%. Simple as that. And that's just on one capacitor. And throughout your pedals, there were many, many, many of these parts, so that the cumulative effect, the add-up effect of everything adding up together meant that one pedal from a different batch, it was usually a batch-based thing, so in a batch they'd be quite similar. But when they get a new batch of capacitors in, all those pedals would be quite different. They could be up to 20% different. And in fact, some capacitors, like electrolytics and things, had even bigger tolerances, but it was pretty common. So old vintage pedals really do sound different from one to the next. And so someone would get a pedal and go, oh, this is the Holy Grail pedal, I'm not parting with it. And it really would actually be different. Now, as times have moved on, our component tolerances have gone down from 20, much, much, much smaller. Resistors are typically 1% now. Capacitors are typically around 5%, but even more than that, in the old days when we said 20%, they really swung back and forward 20%. But now when we say 5%, it tends to cluster around the 1% margin in the middle. Even though it might be up to 5% now, actually it's even more accurate than that. So capacitors and resistors now are very, very, very accurately made. So there is very little variation batch to batch. All pedals sound the same, which is cool. As a manufacturer, you can guarantee your design. But it's not a lot of fun, that, isn't it? So wouldn't it be great, I thought, if we could recapture that vintage spirit in a pedal design? And I got to think, well, why can't we? Because my pedals are built on a small scale, but they're semi-automated. So a lot of my parts get put on no matter what, and that's fine. But then I finish them off by hand with the capacitors. So why can't I just have a wonderful chart and I will randomize it? We will have what I was going to call the Chaos Editions. And in a Chaos Edition pedal, I will pick deliberately 10 or 12 key points within the pedal which would have an impact on the tone. And I would set a range of variations within those ranges that are all going to sound good. So what you're going to get is every pedal, not even batches, every pedal sounding a little different, all sounding within the ballpark. So this Pumpkin Queen, they're all going to sound like a Grand Classic. You're never going to pick one up and say, oh, that's terrible, it sounds like a fuzz face. It's awful, it sounds like this. You know what I mean? Not that fuzz faces are terrible, but they're just very different. They're all going to sound in the way you expect, but all the controls are going to be subtly different. One is going to have a little more body in the bass control, and another's going to have a little more tight edge. One's going to have an area treble, the next going to have a slightly fuller one. And by picking these values and randomizing them, it means everyone gets a unique pedal, everyone has a bit of fun with this. You can still buy the values I choose, just buy a Grand Classic. But if you'd like a Chaos pedal that is completely uniquely specific to you, how cool would that be? Now, I haven't queued this up. Have I got, this will take me a moment because I'm a moron. Let me see if I can add my Excel spreadsheet to this. Now I'll show you, I'll keep talking while I'm doing this bit of adding because I show it is. So basically I've already looked at the, we just want to add display capture, window capture, add window capture. Create new, we'll call it Excel. Okay, and it knows exactly what I want. Okay, let's have that, and let's put it on. So here we go. Ha, beat me to it. Got it in there. Got it in there. So I picked out the values already. Let's expand this out so you can't see my face. Oh, I'm gone. No. So here we go. I'm going to squeeze in this corner. We're pointing this way. This way. Can never work out which way it goes. This way. So basically, what we've got here is the key elements of the Grand Classic and the names in the pumpkin that I've identified within the circuit that make a really interesting difference. Cool. And I have figured out what sort of range I want them to change. So sort of for the crunch button, the mid-range boost, we can go from what I've called -3 to +3. These are my values. My values are still a bit secret. So from a warmer, lower bass, mid-range, down to say 400 hertz, more useful for bass, so up to a higher 900 hertz. So just subtle differences. Bass boost, a range for each control I'm willing to swap those values out for. Also, so that's going to change the bite, rot, and shift buttons, all three buttons. It's going to change the high tone control, the mid tone control a little bit. We're going to change how the amp control works. Is hard change. There's a lot of parts around that, so we can change both the far left, the far right, and the center because it's a complicated map control. And then we've got 4 different filter areas within the gain clipping that I've sort of thought these are important. This affects how saturated and it is. This is sort of like the clarity of the way it distorts. This is sort of smooths it out a bit, and this is the harsh factor where we can just make it a little bit harsher. So these are really, really cool. And turns out that with what I've worked out there, almost 1.5 billion combinations. You heard that right. 1.5 billion. To be precise, 147061250. How bonkers is that? So, Chaos Editions, the first being the Pumpkin Queen, Ultra Limited Edition. Every single one is going to sound different unless I sell more than 1.5 billion pedals, where they might get some duplicates. And they're just going to look really, really cool. So watch this space. I'm going to keep updating you as we go along. I'm not going to be able to give you sound samples. That's not a thing because I mean, how many times do you want me to record them? And you know, but yeah, I hope you guys are really on board this. I hope everyone's on board this. I hope you like this idea. I think it's the way to own a unique pedal. Obviously, each will have its unique serial number. It'll have its unique profile. Everything about the pedals will be unique. They're just going to look really cool, sound really cool, and give this incredible variety where I hope this becomes something really cool in the future. I would like to do this with other pedals. Let's see how successful this is. Let's see if you can get on board with this for me. Okay? So if you've been on the fence for a while, I would say honestly buy a Pumpkin Queen. Don't Grand Classic's great. Get the stand pedal. I am so proud of the pedal. It's the most amazing ever. But this is just, if you've got a bit of daring in you and you fancy a gamble, do it! I'm so excited. I will show you more when I've got more to show. But yeah, Chaos Editions, the Pumpkin Queen.